Resources to deal.
Recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Shabbat, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, I think the thing that I find so disheartening, so unfortunate about FBI Director Comey's decision not to recommend criminal charges against former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton last week was that for a lot of Americans, it looked like we're seeing a double standard here, unequal treatment under the law. Under the facts of the case as laid out by Director Comey, virtually anybody else, I think most Americans think, including myself, there would have been charges brought for a crime against virtually anybody else in this country. But the politically connected Hillary Clinton, well, we won't charge her. I mean, look what Comey laid out. It's already been laid out to some degree, but I think it warrants doing it again. He found that despite the fact that Hillary claimed that she'd never sent or received classified information over a private email, she'd actually sent 110 of them, over 100 of them. And 8 of those were determined to have been top secret at the time that they were sent. Now, I assume that based upon the way you've answered some of my colleagues' questions prior to this, you're not going to acknowledge what I think virtually every other American believes, even her supporters. And that's at least acknowledge, as Director Comey did, that she lied. Would you respond?
Congressman, with respect to the director's statements, as I've indicated, he's provided really unprecedented access into his views of the matter, and I would refer you to them. I understand the issue that you raise obviously is one involving perceptions as to whether or not charges would have been brought in some other situation. And again, I can only refer you back to the director's statements where he chose to outline the fact that no other cases similar to this had in fact been brought.
Let me go back to what Mr. Sensenbrenner referred to. I think it's one of the great mysteries of this case. And that's why extreme carelessness, apparently not in his mind, and you accepted it, so I guess apparently not in your mind, does not constitute gross negligence. Now, I'm an attorney. I practiced 16 years before coming here, and I've been on this committee for 20 years now, so even though I'm not actively practicing law right now, been doing this type of thing for a long time. And I, for the life of me, don't know what the difference between extreme carelessness and gross negligence is. He said he found one, but apparently not the others. Could you shed some light for me and perhaps anybody else in this room or that may ultimately watch this? What is the difference between the two?
Well, Congressman, again, I'm not going to further explain the director's comments as he has, I believe, explained them. What I will say, when people have asked, and I believe, and I understand your question to be the meaning of gross negligence, one always, as you know, refer to the statute itself, relevant cases, and then, of course, it is a very fact-specific inquiry. And since to go further would go into the facts of this case, I'm not able to go further at this time.
Okay.
But we always start with the statute. We start with relevant case law. We start with legislative history into the determination of what Congress meant.
Also, as Sensenbrenner mentioned, I've got limited time as well. So since you're not going to answer that question, let me give you one final question here. And let me go back to this double standard thing that I mentioned before. I couldn't help being reminded when this whole thing, especially over the last week, of something that I was involved in this very committee 18 years ago. And at the time, it was Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, who was in trouble. He was accused of sexually harassing a number of women, and then he lied under oath about it, committed perjury. He'd been asked if there were other women. There was a civil lawsuit brought, and oftentimes when you have a lawsuit like that, you go to other people. Did you sexually, were you aggressive with people who were under your jurisdiction or that you had some power over? Did you ever do that? No, he never did. Well, then a young intern came forward that was working under him at the White House. And she had physical proof. He denied it, but there was physical proof. I won't go into exactly what that was, but there was proof about that. So he was pretty much caught up in this. He lied, committed perjury. That's why articles of impeachment were voted affirmatively out of this committee, and then in the full House, and then he went for trial in the Senate. I know a lot about that because they picked 13 members to be the prosecutors in that case, the House managers, and I was one under Henry Hyde, who, of course, has gone on. My principal focus at that trial was the topic of perjury, the elements of it, its history, what you had to prove. And in my argument with the Senate, my argument about that was that we had hundreds of people all over the country who were in jail, behind bars for perjury, and the President of the United States shouldn't be above the law. Well, the ultimate vote was 50 to remove him, 50 to stay, so he remained President. But I would just conclude by saying that every American, including the President of the United States, including a candidate for the highest office in our land, ought to be treated equally under the law. And I think in this case, I think it's a travesty, because I don't think Hillary Clinton has been treated like any other American would have been treated under the same circumstances. And I yield back.
Chair thanks. Gentleman recognizes the gentlewoman